Her true story from Texas. They locked me in the dog shed and said, sign the inheritance papers or stay here forever. So I signed something else. They thought I'd break. I built something instead. You are not my mother anymore. You are just an obstacle keeping me from selling this house. You hungry? Sign it and we'll give you dog food. That's mercy, old woman. That was the last thing my son said before he grabbed my wrist and dragged me across the kitchen floor. I lost my balance, hit the corner of the table, and felt the sting shoot up my ribs. He did not stop. He yanked harder. Please, Nathan, I whispered. Shut up, he snapped. You brought this on yourself. He shoved the back door open. The screen clattered against the wall, scaring the birds off the fence. I looked behind, hoping maybe, just maybe, my daughter-in-law would intervene. But she stood there in her high heels and smeared lipstick, arms crossed like a judge watching a guilty verdict unfold. No pity in her eyes, just an annoyance. He dragged me past the roses I had once planted with his father. Their petals were dried, brown, and crumbling. Like me. My slippers caught on the cracked concrete and my knees buckled, but he did not slow. His grip bruised. His anger boiled. Then he threw open the old wooden door at the edge of the yard. The dog shed. That place hadn't been used since Rufus died 8 years ago. I remember crying more for that dog than I did at my sister's funeral. At least Rufus had loved me unconditionally. Nathan pushed me inside. I stumbled onto the dirt floor, scraping my elbow against the rusted doorframe. Dust exploded into my face. I coughed, wiped my eyes with trembling fingers. He threw a clipboard beside me. Sign it, he said. What is this? I asked, voice hoarse. Resolution of ownership. You sign and the house becomes ours, officially. You don't sign, he smirked. You stay here until you do. You cannot do this, I whispered. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the beer and cologne on his breath. Oh, we can. You are old, confused, unstable. You think anyone's gonna believe you? Hell, we'd tell the neighbors you wandered off. They'd believe that too. But if you sign, well, maybe you'll get to sleep inside tonight. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door and added with a sneer. You hungry? Sign it and we'll give you dog food. That's mercy, old woman. Then he slammed the door shut. The latch clicked. I was alone. I sat there, the clipboard resting on the floor like a landmine. The heat in that shed was unbearable, thick like soup. The stink of mildew clung to the walls. There was no window, just a crack where the plank had warped, letting in a narrow slice of Texas light. I stared at that light for a long time. I was 74 years old. My husband had died 3 years earlier, leaving behind half the house in my name and the other half in a trust we set up together. I had not touched a dime of the retirement funds, not until Nathan and his wife moved back in to help after they both lost their jobs. At first, they brought groceries, cleaned the yard, said all the right things. We'll take care of you, Mom, they promised. You won't have to lift a finger. Then they started using my car without asking, took over my bedroom just for a month, disconnected the landline, began opening my mail. I chalked it up to stress, to their age, to the times. But the real shift came the day my daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "This is not your house anymore. You just live here." And now I was in the dog shed. I looked at the pen taped to the clipboard. They had prepared everything, expected me to be too tired, too frail, too broken to say no. But I was not broken. Not yet. I pressed my hand against my chest and felt my heartbeat, steady, strong. I had raised that boy. I had worked nights, cleaned toilets, mopped blood off hospital floors when I took double shifts. I had done everything a woman was supposed to do, sacrificed, endured, prayed, and still ended up here. They thought they were burying me, but they forgot something important. I remember where every legal document is stored. I remember whose name is still on the second page of the deed. I remember the phone number of the one person who still believes I matter. I did not touch the clipboard. I curled up in the corner of that shed, knees to my chest, and whispered into the darkness, "They will regret this." I did not scream, I did not beg, but inside something shifted. Not rage, not grief, something older, something deeper. A seed, hardened by age, cracked open, and in that crack I planted something stronger than pain. They thought I would sign, they thought I would break, they thought they had locked me up for good, but what they really did was let me go. I was not always this frail thing they shoved into the shadows. Once, I stood straight and tall, ruler in one hand, chalk in the other, teaching third graders how to read their first chapter books in a sunlit Texas classroom. My name was on bulletin boards. My handwriting was neat and round. I knew every student's middle name and the color of their backpacks. I stayed late to tutor the slowest learners and packed extra sandwiches for the ones who came to school hungry. Back then, my world was small but full. My life was not glamorous, but it was steady, built on books, lesson plans, and quiet evenings with my husband, James. James was a veteran. He had the kind of silence in him that only men who had seen war carry. He came back from overseas with bad knees and nightmares, but he worked hard, saved every dime, and promised me one thing. This house is yours, no matter what happens. This land will be your shield when I'm gone. And it was. Until it wasn't. Nathan was born during a hot June, while the ceiling fan spun uselessly above our hospital bed. He had the biggest eyes, wide like he already didn't trust the world. I remember holding him and whispering, "You're safe now." And I meant it. Raising him wasn't easy. Money was always tight. When James lost his job during the oil crash, I picked up substitute teaching gigs wherever I could. Some days I'd teach history in the morning and mop floors by midnight. I once pawned my mother's pearl earrings to buy him a saxophone he wanted so badly. Another year, I sold my wedding ring to cover his tuition deposit after he got into college. I told James it was just a thing, but I cried that night. We did without vacations, without new clothes, without complaint. I was proud of that. Proud to be the kind of mother who sacrificed without keeping score. Nathan used to hug me every morning before school. He used to leave sticky notes on the fridge. "Thanks for the grilled cheese, Mom," or "Good luck with the PTA meeting." I saved some of them in a box under my bed. The ink faded, but the memory stayed. But time changes people. Or maybe comfort does. When James passed away, the house got quieter. Nathan had his own family by then, married a woman named Tanya who wore too much perfume and never smiled with her eyes. They were struggling financially. "Just for a little while, Mom," he said, "until we get back on our feet." I opened my door, set out clean towels, gave up my bedroom, told myself it was temporary, but temporary stretched into forever. They brought in new furniture, rearranged the living room. "Your couch squeaks," Tanya had said. They changed the curtains, replaced my tea kettle, and threw away the Afghan James's mother had crocheted for me. "It's dusty," they explained. I told myself it was just their way. I bit my tongue every time she rolled her eyes at my stories or scolded me for leaving crumbs when I made toast. I tried to make peace. I offered to help cook. She refused. "We have our routines, Marilyn," she said, using my name like a stranger. Nathan changed, too. Slowly, subtly. He stopped asking how my day was. He started calling me her instead of Mom when talking to Tanya. He once corrected me in front of their friends when I mentioned James's old fishing spot. "That was before GPS, Mom," he laughed. Everyone else did too. I laughed along, but something in me chipped. The house that once held birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet Sunday dinners now felt like a waiting room for my absence. They began locking the door to the master suite. My things were moved to the laundry room. Tanya said it made more sense, easier access, she claimed. One night I found her throwing away my spice jars. "They're expired," she said without looking at me. I had bought them just 6 months earlier. Then came the papers. I remember the first time they mentioned streamlining the estate. Tanya wore lipstick that day, bright and glossy, like she was heading to church. "We just want to simplify things," she said. "You know, prepare for the future." Their future, not mine. Still, I tried to believe they had good intentions, until I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. "She'll forget eventually," Tanya said. "Just keep her distracted." "She's old," Nathan replied. "What's she going to do, sue us?" I stood behind the corner, holding a teacup that suddenly felt heavier than stone. That was the moment it all turned. The moment I stopped telling myself they were just young and overwhelmed. The moment I saw the truth. This house was no longer my shield. They had turned it into a trap. But if they thought I was too soft, too senile, too far gone to fight back, they forgot something critical. I may have taught elementary school, but I never stopped learning. and I never forgot how to protect my own. There comes a moment, I think, when you realize you have become invisible in your own home. Not quiet, not respected, invisible. It began with the chair. I had a recliner, old, brown, fraying at the edges. James used to fall asleep in it watching baseball. When he passed, I moved it to the corner of the living room where the afternoon sun hit just right. It was my place. My spot to read, to pray, to remember. One morning, I walked into the living room, and the chair was gone. Tanya said it didn't match the new aesthetic, Nathan said, not looking up from his phone. I stood there like a guest who'd walked into the wrong house. Where is it? In the garage, or maybe the dump, he mumbled. They replaced it with a sleek, modern sofa. All gray angles and cold lines. I sat on the edge once and Tanya wrinkled her nose. Please don't sit there, Marilyn. We just had it cleaned and... She hesitated, then waved her hand near her nose. It's just... You know. I did not know. Until the next day, when I heard her on the phone. She smells like old books and Vicks VapoRub. I can't take it. I stood in the hallway, holding the laundry I had just folded for them, and listened to her laughter echo through my bones. After that, I started eating on the back porch. At first, it was my choice. I told myself the breeze was nice. The birds kept me company. I pretended it was my idea. But soon, they stopped setting a place for me at the table. My plate would be wrapped in foil, left on the counter like a forgotten offering. No fork, no napkin. One evening, I reached for the dining chair, and Tanya said without looking up, "We only have 6 chairs. You can use the stool if you really need to sit." So I did. I sat at the kitchen island like a child, feet dangling, bowl in my lap. She passed behind me with a bottle of Febreze. "Just freshening up," she said. I stopped asking questions after that. Then came the bathroom. We had 2, one in the hallway and one in the master bedroom. I had always used the hall bath until they converted it into a pet station. Tanya got a dog. Some tiny yapping thing that wore sweaters and had its own Instagram account. "We're potty training him," she explained. "It's just easier if we keep that bathroom just for him for now." I was told to use the half bath in the laundry room. No lock, no heating vent, no space to turn around without bumping into the dryer. I started holding in my bladder. I drank less water. My doctor had once warned me about dehydration, but what was worse, kidney stones or shame? At night they locked my bedroom door from the outside. Nathan said it was for my safety. "You wander, Mom," he said. "You could fall. You could get confused." "I'm not confused," I said. He smiled like you do to a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Sure, Mom." They installed a lock on the outside of the guest room door. Every night at 9:00 p.m., Tanya would knock once, then click it shut. "We'll unlock it when we wake up," she said, as if that was kindness. I learned not to need the bathroom at night. I learned to stop drinking tea after noon. I learned to count the hours between freedom. But I also learned something else. I learned to listen. They had grown comfortable, arrogant even. They spoke freely, not realizing I heard everything. Tanya would walk past my door on the phone, saying things like, "We'll sell it once she's officially out. I don't care how we get it signed." "She's slipping," Nathan would reply. "Half the time she can't remember what day it is." I remembered. I remembered everything. I took out the old sweater I kept at the bottom of my drawer, the one James used to call my Christmas cookie cardigan, because I always wore it when baking. Inside the lining was a tear I had sewn shut. I opened it again and slipped in a small notebook. Every night, after the lock clicked and the house quieted, I would write. I wrote what they said, what they did, what they fed me, what I saw. Dates, times, words. I kept the writing small, precise. I had been a teacher, after all. I documented the day Tanya shoved me out of the bathroom with the words, "Go outside if you're that desperate." I wrote about the time Nathan took my phone and erased my contacts. About the doctor's appointment they canceled without telling me. I wrote until my fingers ached. I called it my record of dignity because even if they erased me from their dinner table, from their holidays, from their family photos, I would not let them erase me from the truth. The truth was, I was still here, still thinking, still remembering, still fighting in silence. They had taken my chair, my place at the table, my bathroom, my bedroom door, but they had not taken my mind, and they had not taken my will. The night it happened, the sky cracked open like judgment itself. Thunder rolled over the hills, and lightning danced across the porch rails, lighting up the backyard in flashes like a broken strobe light. Rain poured down in sheets so thick it was hard to breathe without swallowing it. It was the kind of storm that made animals tremble and children crawl under beds. They chose that night. Nathan and Tanya were hosting people. I could hear the laughter long before the door even opened. Music thumped through the walls, and the smell of grilled meat and expensive wine wafted under the crack of my door. I wasn't invited. At 9 sharp, Tanya knocked on my door, once, like always, and clicked the lock shut. But not for long. An hour later, they came back. Nathan opened the door this time. He had that look in his eyes again, the one I used to see when he was a boy caught lying but doubled down instead of confessing. He looked behind him once, made sure no one was watching, then stepped into my room, holding a thin plastic poncho and the clipboard. "Put this on." I stared at him. "What?" "We're moving you," he said flatly. "Too many people in the house tonight. Don't want anyone getting the wrong idea." I sat on the bed. "The wrong idea that your mother lives here?" He grinned without humor. "Exactly." Tanya appeared in the hallway, holding a flashlight and an umbrella. "She's not coming through the house," she said. "Take her through the back." I was barefoot. I tried to grab my sweater. Nathan snatched it away. "Poncho's enough," he said, and then he took my arm, not gently, not with hesitation. He pulled me through the back door, out into the storm. My feet hit the cold, wet mud. The rain soaked my nightgown in seconds. I could barely see through the waterfall pouring from the sky. The wind whipped the poncho around like a flag at half-mast. I knew where he was taking me. The shed. That God-forsaken shed. He opened the door, shoved me inside, and closed it before I could turn around. The bolt slid into place with a sound that would echo in my ears for years. There was no light, no blanket, no dry place to sit. I stood in the dark for a long time, too stunned to move. The smell of rot, mold, and old motor oil hit me first. Then the cold. My bones throbbed, my teeth chattered. I pressed myself into the corner, curled my arms around my knees, and listened. Laughter. Music. Wine glasses clinking. I heard Tanya yell, "Turn it up!" and someone shouted back, "This playlist is fire!" And I sat in the mud, in the dark, in the cold. I could have been a dead dog and they would not have known, or cared. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not in the way they wanted, not into pieces. It broke like a shell cracks when something stronger is ready to come out. I thought of James. I whispered his name. I said it like a prayer, like a lifeline. "James, can you see this?" The rain pounded harder. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Water leaked from the ceiling and ran down the back of my neck. My hands were numb. My hip ached from the cold ground. But what hurt most was not physical. It was the betrayal. The complete abandonment, the way my own son, my only child, had looked at me like trash, like I was nothing but a signature standing between him and a payday. I thought of the birthday cakes I baked from scratch, the soccer games I never missed, the night he threw up at 3:00 a.m. and I held him until morning, the way he used to hold my hand when crossing the street, the way he used to whisper, "Don't leave me, Mommy." And now, he left me in a shed, in a storm. For what? A deed? A house? A future built on cruelty? No. No more. That night I made a decision, not a loud one, not the kind that comes with shouting or threats. It was a quiet decision, born in the mud. I would not forgive them, and I would not sign. They had shown me who they were, and now I would show them who I had been all along. Not weak, not forgetful, not broken. I would not leave this world as their victim. I would not vanish in silence. I would not die in a shed. I would survive, and when the time came, I would rise, and they would remember, not my weakness, but my will. The night after the storm, the air turned still and mean. The mud in the shed had dried into crusted patches, and the stale stench of mildew clung to everything like a second skin. My body ached in places I had forgotten existed, but I was still alive, still thinking. I sat hunched in the corner, watching the light change through the wall crack. It was afternoon, I guessed. Maybe Sunday? Or Monday. The days were starting to blur. That was when I heard the knock. Not the sharp rap of Nathan's hand or Tanya's impatient tap. This was soft, hesitant. I froze. Signora Marilyn? A girl's voice whispered through the crack. Are you okay? I knew that voice. Rosa. She was the teenage granddaughter of the Mexican family that lived next door, the Vasquezes. Her grandparents kept chickens and played music that floated through our yards on Sundays. Rosa used to wave to me when she was little. I had once helped her with a science fair project on butterflies. Is that you, sweetheart? I croaked. There was silence, then a trembling. Oh my God, they really locked you in here? I heard rustling. Then a hand slipped through the base of the wall, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. Here, she whispered. Pan dulce. And a little water. I took it slowly. My hands shook. I opened the bag and bit into the sweetbread, tears pricking my eyes as the sugar hit my tongue. I saw them, she whispered. At the party. Laughing. I told my mom something was wrong, but she said not to get involved. But I couldn't. Senora, do you want me to call the police? No, I whispered, with more strength than I'd used in days. Not yet. She was quiet. Do you trust me, Rosa? I asked. A pause. Yes. Then I need you to trust that I'm not done yet. The next evening, she came again, this time with a flashlight and a rolled-up blanket tucked in her backpack. She passed it through the same crack along with a pencil and a tiny notebook. I thought, maybe you'd want to write something, she said. I smiled for the first time in days. Smart girl. It became a ritual. Every night, after the house went quiet, Rosa would sneak out, silent as a ghost, and slip through the shadows to my shed. She brought fruit, Band-Aids. Once, even a tiny bottle of hand lotion. Why are you helping me? I asked her one night. Her voice cracked. Because if this happened to my abuela and no one helped her, I'd never forgive myself. That's when I told her. Everything. I told her about the trust, the partial deed, the forged documents, the isolation, the abuse, the signatures they wanted, the legacy they were trying to erase. Her eyes burned with something fierce. I just graduated, she said. Pre-law. I haven't even passed the bar yet, but I know enough I can help. The next night she brought a small folder and a portable scanner. I borrowed it from my cousin, she said. He works IT. They don't check his bag. We worked by flashlight. I dictated, she typed. We read every page twice. We referenced every clause. She knew the language. I knew the weight behind every word. Then, she said the words I'll never forget. Do you want to write a new will? I stared at her, stunned. I can't notarize it, she said quickly, but I know someone who can, a friend from school. She's licensed. We can get her here, quietly. A beat of silence passed. Do you trust me? She asked. I looked her straight in the eyes. Yes. She returned the next night, this time with another young woman in a hoodie and sneakers, carrying a leather case. They stepped into the shed like they were entering a sacred space. Quiet. Respectful. I sat on the damp floor, draped in Rosa's blanket, and held the pen with fingers that trembled only slightly. The notary checked my ID, asked her questions, followed protocol. Rosa held the flashlight, and I signed. A new will, a new trust, a new future. I left everything, not to Nathan, not to Tanya, not to blood that had betrayed me, but to something greater. To the battered women's shelter that had once helped a friend of mine escape a violent husband, to the library that had given me sanctuary in my loneliest years, to a foundation in my husband's name that would support elderly women left behind by their families. And I signed my name like it was an oath. Rosa smiled, eyes glistening. You did it, she whispered. No, I said. We did. They left silently, documents hidden in a backpack, flashlight off until they reached the sidewalk. I curled into the corner and closed my eyes, heart full. The world had betrayed me, but a stranger, barely 20, had saved me. And tomorrow I would begin again. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not just in temperature but in feeling, the kind of chill that settles deep in your chest no matter how many scarves you wear. I sat near the front, in my wheelchair, wrapped in the same brown cardigan I had worn when I first met the judge years ago for a different case, when James and I filed for our trust. It felt like a lifetime ago. Nathan and Tanya walked in like they were attending a fashion gala, not a court hearing. She wore a tight navy dress, pearl earrings, and a fake solemn look smeared across her face. He had on a charcoal suit I didn't recognize, probably rented, his hair slicked back too much, his cologne entering the room before he did. They didn't look at me. But I saw the smirk, that small curl at the edge of Nathan's lips that said, "This is already over." They sat across from me with their attorney, a young man who looked barely out of law school but smug enough to have watched too many courtroom dramas. He adjusted his tie, opened his briefcase, and handed over the copy, the supposed will with my signature. A messy, shaky scrawl on the bottom of a boilerplate template. They had no idea I was left-handed, and that I'd faked the tremble. The judge was an older woman, gray hair in a tight bun, sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. She looked over the document, raised an eyebrow, and turned to me. "Mrs. Monroe," she said, her voice even, "do you recognize this signature?" I leaned forward slowly, let the silence stretch. Then I said, loud and clear, "I do not." A murmur moved through the room like wind through dry grass. Nathan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this document was signed in the presence of both my clients, and it matches previous records of her signature." "It does not match mine," I interrupted, not raising my voice, "because I never signed it, not willingly, not knowingly, and not in any condition that could be considered legal." The judge held up a hand. "We'll allow testimony." That's when the door at the back opened and in walked Rosa. Beside her, a tall man in a crisp dark suit, a confident stride, and a silver wedding band glinting on his finger. "My counsel," I said. Nathan blinked. Tanya's head snapped toward the man. He took his place beside me, nodding politely to the judge. "Counselor, please introduce yourself," the judge said. "My name is Miguel Vasquez," he said, "licensed attorney in the state of Texas, representing Mrs. Marilyn Monroe in defense of her estate, her autonomy, and her lawful documentation, including a notarized, updated will and trust." Nathan's face turned gray. Miguel continued, handing the judge a sealed folder. "Inside you will find notarized documents drafted under my supervision, recorded communications of verbal coercion, and photographic evidence of Mrs. Monroe being held in conditions that violate both elder care statutes and basic human decency." "Objection," Nathan's lawyer barked. "This is outrageous. Where is the proof?" Rosa stood up. "I'm the proof." She held up a flash drive. "I documented it. The shed, the injuries, the food or lack of it, the way they talked to her. I brought meals. I brought a notary. I have records." Tanya stood up. "You're just a neighbor's kid." "No, ma'am," Rosa said, calm but steady. "I'm also pre-law, and I know what elder abuse looks like." Miguel nodded toward the judge. "Your Honor, we request this false will be thrown out, and charges investigated against Mr. and Mrs. Monroe for attempted fraud and unlawful coercion of a dependent adult." The room went dead silent. The judge flipped through the new documents. Her eyes narrowed as she read. Then she set the folder down and looked directly at Nathan. "You brought a falsified document into my courtroom, Mr. Monroe. That is perjury. You attempted to defraud your own mother. That is theft. And from the evidence presented, I see grounds for further investigation under elder abuse laws." Nathan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Tanya tried to speak. "But we thought—" "No," the judge snapped. "You wanted. That's not the same as thought." She turned to me. "Mrs. Monroe, the court upholds the most recent and notarized version of your will. Your estate remains in your control, and your family, should you even call them that, has no legal claim." I exhaled slowly. Not victory. Relief. Rosa squeezed my hand. As we turned to leave, I looked over my shoulder. Nathan stood frozen, his face ashen. Tanya sat with her hands clenched into fists, so tight her knuckles turned white. I did not speak. I did not need to, because for once the silence was mine, and it was louder than anything they had ever said. The courthouse doors swung open, and for the first time in weeks I felt real sunlight on my face. It was warm, not just on my skin but in my chest, my bones, my breath. Rosa pushed my wheelchair down the marble steps, slowly, carefully. Miguel walked beside us, briefcase in one hand, eyes scanning the street as if expecting Nathan and Tanya to appear again and try one last trick. They didn't. They had slunk out a side door, their lawyer trailing behind, all three too stunned or too ashamed to face the world they thought they'd conquered. The judge's ruling had been clear. The will Nathan forged? Nullified. The coercion? Documented. The estate? Permanently transferred under my direction. The house? No longer his inheritance, no longer mine either, not anymore. It now belonged to something bigger. That was always the plan. 2 weeks later I returned, not to live, but to witness. The old house had been scrubbed clean of its past. The mold on the baseboards had been bleached. The carpet, stained with years of secrets, was torn out and replaced with warm wood floors. The kitchen gleamed. The air smelled like lavender and lemon and fresh-baked bread. A new sign hung above the porch steps. The Marilyn Monroe House, a refuge for elder women. The same bedroom they locked me inside was now a therapy room with plush chairs and framed photos of smiling grandmothers and great-grandmothers. The bathroom I was denied now had handrails, fresh towels, and a note on the mirror that read, "You are seen." I donated the property in full. Along with it, my late husband's pension fund, an anonymous trust I had been quietly building for over a decade, and the remaining balance of my savings account. I did not need much. I had a small apartment now, clean, quiet, just enough space for me and my memories, but I visited the house once a week, not to haunt it, to witness it heal. Some nights I sat in the garden, rebuilt, blooming again, and watched the women walk outside barefoot, feeling safe enough to look at the stars. They reminded me of myself. Tired, yes, but not finished. The letters started coming a month after the center opened. At first, just a few, then dozens. From women I had never met, women across the country. Some signed their names, others just left initials or quotes or shaky handwriting with teardrops on the corners. "Thank you for reminding me I still matter. My daughter hasn't called me in 5 years, but your story gave me the strength to call myself a survivor. I slept in a shed too. You made me feel less alone." Each letter I placed in a wooden box beside my bed, the same box that once held Nathan's childhood drawings. I did not throw his away, I simply moved them. Because I believe people can change, but I do not believe in waiting forever. Nathan never called. Not once. No apology, no explanation. Tanya unfollowed me on everything within a week of the ruling. Rosa told me they moved to another state, trying to start fresh, she said. Let them. I had already started new. Better. My days are quiet now. I wake up when I choose. Brew tea the way I like it. I keep a journal, not of pain anymore, but of peace. I volunteer twice a week at the center, helping women fill out job applications or just listening to them over coffee. Sometimes I look in the mirror and hardly recognize the woman staring back. Not because I've aged, but because I've risen. People used to say old women were fragile, that we forget, that we fade, that we're too soft to fight, too tired to resist. They were wrong. We do not forget. We remember everything. We remember the smell of a child's shampoo, the sound of betrayal behind a closed door, the weight of a signature we refused to give. We remember who helped us and who didn't. They locked me in a dog shed. They called it mercy. They thought I would break. But that shed wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. The moment I was forced to the ground, I found something deeper than rage. I found resolve. I found truth. I found the kind of silence that does not beg, it builds. I built again. Not just my life, but a legacy. And if one day Nathan walks past that house and sees the sign with my name on it, I hope he feels something. Not shame, not fear, but awareness. That the mother he once silenced used her silence to change the world. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am something else now. Whole, free, unforgettable. Some months after the court ruling, spring settled over Texas like a second chance. The air grew sweeter, softer, the kind of weather that invites things to grow again, not just flowers, but people too. I found myself walking again. Not far, just around the garden or down the sidewalk in front of my little apartment. I wore a hat James once bought me on our 30th anniversary. It had a wide brim and a faded ribbon, but it still made me feel like someone who mattered. One morning, Rosa showed up with coffee and a question. "Would you be willing to speak to the women at the center?" she asked, hopeful. "Just share your story?" I hesitated. "I'm no inspiration," I said. She smiled gently. "But you are." So I did. The room was filled with women, some my age, some younger. They sat in folding chairs, shoulders tight, eyes guarded. I knew those expressions. I had worn them too. I told them everything, not just about the shed, but the before, the years of silence, the slow erasure, the 1,000 tiny humiliations that most people overlook because they don't leave bruises. Only memory. When I finished, no one clapped, but one woman stood, then another, and that night, the women in that room did something most people never do. They saw me, not as a victim, as a mirror. From then on, I came every week. I led a writing group. We called it the Unwritten Letters. Each woman wrote one letter to someone who hurt her, left her, forgot her. Letters never meant to be mailed, but always meant to be heard. We read them aloud, we cried, we laughed, we stitched ourselves back together line by line. One afternoon, Rosa brought a stack of mail. "This one's from Minnesota," she said, handing me an envelope with no return address. Inside was a short note in pencil. "My daughter left me at a gas station 6 years ago. I thought that was the end, but then I heard your story. I found a place to stay. I'm safe now. Thank you." I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I folded it and placed it in my box, the one that now held hundreds of thank yous from strangers who were no longer strangers. Meanwhile, the house, the one they once tried to steal, had blossomed into a living thing, a place of rhythm and routine and hope. You could smell cookies baking on Wednesdays, hear laughter from the back porch every Friday evening, see knitting circles forming under the same tree where James used to hang bird feeders. We added a garden. The women grew vegetables and flowers. Someone painted a mural on the side wall, birds, blooming branches, and in the center the words, "We rise quietly." I had them add one more line, in memory of the women they thought would break. That summer I celebrated my 75th birthday, surrounded by women who called me Miss Marilyn and brought handmade cards. They gave me a cake shaped like a doghouse, with the words, "From the shed to the summit," written in pink icing. We laughed so hard we cried. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in the garden with a cup of tea and the stars for company. I thought about Nathan. He hadn't called, hadn't written, and maybe he never would. But strangely, I no longer waited for it. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to live without needing the apology that never came. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "I made it, James. I really made it." And in the rustle of the wind, I swear I heard him say, "I always knew you would." Now, every month, a new woman moves into the house. Each one arrives with her own history, her own heartbreak, her own silence, and each one leaves with something more. A key, a journal, a chance. As for me, I keep walking, keep writing, keep remembering. I am no longer invisible. I am part of something that matters. And, in the quietest moments, when the world goes still and the moon rises over the porch, I smile to myself, not because I won, but because I endured. And in the end, that's the most powerful story of all. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or locked away in your own kind of silence, then you're not alone. Here on Grama True Stories, we share the voices the world tried to forget. Stories of betrayal and quiet revenge, of dignity rebuilt in the dark, of women who didn't break, they built. So if you believe that truth has power, if you believe that silence isn't weakness, it's memory, then subscribe. Join us. Because revenge has no expiration date. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens. Subscribe now to Grandma True Stories, where every story is true and every truth matters.